Turning our attention to Germany, following World War One, chaos is going to emerge there, like in every other place in regions where the war was lost. Kaiser Wilhelm II, the emperor, flees, and a new government is set up based on democratic principles and parliamentarianism and such. And this new government that is established following the imperial monarchy that was once there is known as the Weimar government, W-E-I-M-A-R. And so sometimes we refer to Germany as the Weimar Republic, etc. And this is this period before Hitler takes power of a more democratic nation being formed. But there's chaos in Germany like there was in Italy. There's a currency crisis that happens in the early 1920s. There's this perception of the Treaty of Versailles being overly harsh. Part of the treaty's provisions that they had to demilitarize and reduce the size of their military and their navy, and there's this sense of humiliation and shame. There's poverty in the early years, so there's the same sense of chaos that was happening in Italy. And like Italy, that there was paramilitary organizations wandering about. The same thing happened in Germany. One of the most powerful groups that emerged is something called the Freikorps. And these were ex-war veterans who were going around trying to impose their wishes upon various populations. Like I said in the earlier video, there's some communist governments that arise in various locations, and the Weimar government, which is forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, had no ability to debate or to discuss the treaty, is then going to be blamed for all this chaos and later problems that occurred during the Depression. And just like Mussolini decided to make a coup upon the government, upon a weak structure, Adolf Hitler is going to do the same thing. Adolf Hitler was an Austrian who volunteered to be part of the German military. He was a decorated soldier in World War I. He left the war, and like many young men, he was a disaffected soldier. He later joins an emerging party, the National Socialists, and in German this is an acronym that looks like N-A-Z-I, Nazi, and so today we will just refer to that as the Nazi Party, but it's the National Socialist Party. You'll see this as well. And this was a very small organization, and it's not going to be until after when the Depression starts that really any attention really should be drawn to Hitler. However, in 1923, Hitler makes a move to have his own coup, just like Mussolini had done. And this is known as the Beer Hall Putsch, P-U-T-S-C-H. And that's the word in German for like a coup d'etat, a blow to the state or such, when you have like a military takeover. And he does this by rousing some men of the Nazi Party to try and make a march towards Munich and create a new government. And the Beer Hall Putsch on November 9th is an absolute failure, and Hitler is arrested and eventually sent to prison. It's during his defense, during the trial though, that he receives notoriety from this event, which might have been just a small occurrence in German history. He is given the ability from a lenient judge to have unlimited almost discussion of his views in his defense without being interrupted. These are published, and he receives this local, small party in Germany receives notoriety through Hitler from this particular speech. There is a paramilitary organization associated with Hitler's groups in this early stage as well. The Nazi Party had its own paramilitary group, and this is, again, we've got to try to keep this in mind, that imagine the Republican Party having a military entourage that goes with them everywhere they go and beats up, people in the crowd and opponents or something. Or the Democratic Party had their version. This is what it's like during this time period. These small little groups. They all have men, and oftentimes thug-like men who are going around and distributing literature. And Hitler's or the Nazi Party, which he was just a part of at the time. He wasn't the leader in the early days. Would go around in trucks full of guys who kind of stir up some commotion, throw out swastikas, and hand out pamphlets. And Hitler became famous for his oratory skills in front of large crowds. When he's arrested, he's sentenced to 5 years in prison. He's only going to serve a little over a year. And it's during this time period that he writes his most famous work, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. And my Struggle is part autobiography, part vision of the future, part his discussion of political strategy. And if you read Mein Kampf, and I can provide an excerpt for people who are interested, it is really a blueprint in many ways for much of what he's going to do. And he expresses his virulent anti-Slav, anti-Poles especially, anti-Slav, anti-Bolshevik, and anti-Jewish views. And anti-Jewish views are extreme. And there's really a difference between anti-Semitism and his version of anti-Semitism. It's not, I would say, any type of run-of-the-mill anti-Semitism. Mein Kampf also talks about strategy in front of a crowd, and I think this is the most insightful part of Hitler's writing, is that he discusses how a crowd can be manipulated, and he says it straight out. This is how you manipulate a crowd. And one of the things he talks about is, today we discuss as talking points, that you stick to one or two items and you never stray from those items, and you just repeat them over and over again in various permutations, and you don't over-intellectualize a speech, and you speak to the lowest common denominator. It doesn't matter if you have evidence, it just matters that you assert your opinion. He would argue that you don't offer any kind of evidence. You just assert something and you repeat it endlessly, and these are some of the things that he talks about in Mein Kampf. He talks a bit about his racial ideology in it as well, and his view that Jews should be eliminated from Europe, and this idea of him knowing about the final solution, what we think of as the Holocaust, is not mapped out in Mein Kampf, but it's evident that if he were in power, there would definitely be action taken against Jews and Slavs, which most of the attacks are on. And sometimes I have to, wonder when some people who are in favor of Hitler, and maybe they have a Polish background, and they just don't understand really his ideology at all, because much of it is directed towards these two groups. Like Mussolini, he has an anti-Bolshevik stance, which becomes popular at different time periods. He really truly rises to power, though, once the Depression hits, and that's the key piece here, that Hitler doesn't rise from the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler rises from the Great Depression, and as unemployment increases to astronomical levels in Germany, then people like Hitler, who offer vast radical solutions, are given attention and support. And that's the key, really, to 20th century European history in this era. Is the pivotal moment is the Great Depression, not the reparations, not the treaty, not the boundaries, but an enormous economic crisis that leads people towards dangerous ideology.